What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining me on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 2015 BMW F82 M4. Today on the F82, we are going to be covering how to replace or overhaul your cooling system. Our main focus is going to be the water pump, the thermostat, and the radiator, as well as swapping out the coolant and doing a couple of the hoses that we're going to interact with while doing this job. As you know, this car has a split cooling system. There's a low temp circuit, a high temp circuit, and we've already done some of the auxiliary radiators, the charge coolers, and the coolant system on that side of things, but we haven't really touched anything on the high temp circuit, meaning the main cooling system for the engine. To learn a little bit more about how that system works, be sure to click the link in the video description below, where our very own Gareth takes you on a deep dive of that whole system. For today, all these parts that we're going to be installing are available on fcpo.com. You'll notice we are using a stock radiator, and that's because this is really all that's available right now for the S55. It's a pretty stout unit already from BMW. It's all aluminum. There's no plastic end tanks to fail. So really, this is going to be more of a if you need to know how to replace it than a should you know how to replace it. The only real reason you would need to replace these is if you have some freak failure, obviously if you're in an accident, or if for some reason you've been running the wrong coolant in your vehicle and you have a lot of buildup inside the cooling system. Otherwise, these should be pretty stout. Again, some of the hoses that we're going to be touching will be replacing. This car is now almost 10 years old, so like anything else, rubber starts to degrade over that period of time. Our water pump, you'll see we have a couple O-rings which will show you that don't typically get covered when looking at diagrams. They actually don't even show up. One of them is going to be for our turbo feed line, so that's an important one to get. And again, all these parts are listed in the video description below. The pump comes with a new gasket, and it also comes with a new O-ring up here for where this hose connects to, so it's going to be all good to go. And same deal with our thermostat. That also comes with a new seal, ready to rock and roll, so no worries there. Other thing you're going to need that's not pictured here is going to be some distilled water to mix your coolant concentrate with. But before we continue on, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this job, you're going to need a basic socket set. As far as sockets go, we're using everything from an 18 up to a 22 mil, including a 17 for our lug bolts. We have a couple of the 1/2-inch drive as well as a 3/8 drive here on the table. Specialty sockets, if you will, are going to be an E8, a T40, a T30, a T25, and if you have the Fall Line Motorsports oil cooler guard, you're going to need a 3mm hex for that. Ratchets, we have a 1/2-inch, we also have a 3/8 drive torque wrench and a regular ratchet. 1/4-inch ratchet with a couple of adapters and extensions. Just make sure your torque wrench is also capable of torquing anywhere from 8 Newton meters up to 140 Newton meters. We're going to also be using a set of snap ring pliers. I have two different picks here, a right angle pick and a 40-degree angle pick, a screwdriver. I like to use dielectric grease to lube up the O-rings, especially in any hoses that are going to be going back on. Some torque seal for our hardware and some electric tools to speed up the removal and install of some of the bigger hardware. And we have some bungee cords to hold some of the hoses and stuff out of the way. And to fill our cooling system, we're going to be using our vacuum fill tool, which you have seen us use before on the channel. This you're going to also need a air compressor for. Not pictured here but needed is going to be a catch pan for your coolant. Now that we know what we're working with, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. First things first, my good people, it should go without saying that the car should be completely cool when you go to do any work on your cooling system. Last thing you want to do is hurt yourself or hurt the vehicle. To help the cooling draining process, which is going to be the first thing we're going to start with. I mean, there is a ton of things to remove up top here if you want to start with that. But for us, we're just going to drain the coolant first. We're going to remove the expansion tank cap just to break the vacuum seal and let it flow a little bit easier. And then from here, we're going to lift the vehicle up. We're going to take the driver's side wheel off so we can get to the auxiliary radiator for the high temp circuit. It's a little bit easier to get to, in my opinion, and drain from. So that's going to be our next move. We have 5 17mm lug bolts holding on our wheel. Next, we're going to remove the fender liner and the bottom shield. Now, you're going to notice that we're missing some hardware, and that's because all these fender liners are getting replaced. This car is part of a larger series, which you can follow over on FCP Euro Media YouTube channel. So we have a bit of missing 8mm on this, so we're just going to zap out the few that are left. remove them, make sure you get the bottom shield off as well, and then we can start draining some coolant. You'd have another one here. You always have another one on the interior behind your soft line for your brake line, which is pretty standard. 3 at the bottom that attach to the bottom shield. And we have 2 more up top, which again, we only have 1 off right now. With those removed, we can pop this baby out. Kind of pushing away from the fender to get it out of the lip. And that's going to expose our auxiliary radiator. Again, this is for the high temp circuit. So this is just what I find easier to drain the coolant from. Of course, there's always going to be a little bit left over in the system, so you still have to be mindful as we undo hoses down the road. But this is going to be the start for the high temp circuit, and then we will have to hop over to the low temp circuit on the passenger side, as well as one of the pumps that we're removing. It's part of the low temp circuit. So draining the whole thing, my good people. To remove the coolant lines, I'm just using a small pick. You can use a small flathead screwdriver. We're just going to release the clips from our lines like so. And then these are going to have quite a bit of pressure on them. So just make sure you have your catch pan situated. And we're going to release the top line as well. When you release this top line, because it's freeing up the vacuum, if you will, in this auxiliary, be prepared for it to kind of want to spout out at you as well. So just have your catch pan in a good spot. This one, the clip is up top. Same exact thing, just lift it up. Then we're gonna give this a couple minutes to do its thing. Again, this is the larger side of the system, so it's gonna take a bit to drain out. You can tuck this hose down a little bit just to help the flow. And then from there, we'll pick it back up. We're gonna hook up the lines once more, just since we're gonna be done messing with it. And then we'll do the exact same thing on the passenger side. We're gonna clip these babies back in. Beautiful. We'll clean up our radiator a bit and get some of this loose coolant off. And now with that, we can hop either up top or down below. Since we have the car up in the air right now, I think we're gonna start underneath the car, get some of the things out of our way to get that fan out, and then we'll move up top, get all this beautiful carbon out of our way, the intake system, and a few more goodies so that we can pull more stuff out of the way. Basically, anytime you're gonna do any work on an S55 vehicle, you have to take the whole thing apart. That's just what it is, my good people. Next, we're gonna remove our fall line oil cooler guard. Ours is held in by 3mm hex bolts all around and 4 13 mils on either side. If you still have the factory plastic cooler guard, then it's going to be a bunch of 8mm bolts and a couple 13s. So we're going to get the 3mm hex out first. We have 7 of those. The next thing we're going to remove, and this isn't necessarily mandatory to do the water pump at all, but it's more or less just makes life a little bit easier when removing the fan, which is probably the biggest pain in the butt out of this whole DIY, is removing this stiffening plate. Just having that inch more room to work with in here and getting this tab out of our way is gonna go a long way. So yes, you need to get new one-time use bolts, but your arms and your hands are gonna thank you from cutting them up on the shield. So we have a couple 8 mils around the perimeter to remove, and then we're gonna remove these 16mm bolts and set this baby aside. It's gonna be a little bit extra work to do this, 2 seconds, but it's gonna make a world of a difference when it comes to removing the fan and all that good stuff. Once we get that off, then we can work on getting our oil cooler out of the way. We have 8 16mm bolts to remove. Wonderful. Now that we have that free, we're gonna work on freeing up this oil cooler from the bottom of our good stuff here. There is a line here that pops into the subframe. This clip is out. So normally I would say pop it out or open up this alligator clip and free up this hose. It's gonna give you a little bit more room to move this around. Next, we have a couple 13s on either end to undo. I think I'm gonna grab a bungee cord or a zip tie or something similar to help just keep this out of our way. Maybe we can tuck it back here somewhere. So let me grab that first and then we'll pop this baby off. That should keep this out of our way enough. Maybe throw on a second one over here. But now we have a couple of things to remove. We have another auxiliary pump, which is why we drained the low temp circuit as well. So we're gonna get this out of our way. We have a fan shroud, some hosing, and we'll go from there. We have two T25s to remove this rear shroud from our fan assembly. This is gonna help in removing the whole fan shroud. Just pull it down. This last part is super soft plastic, and we'll set that to the side. That's going to give us a little bit more room to get to the connections on the auxiliary pump. So let's work on that next. We have an electrical connector that goes to our pump. This has a little gray lock tab. You just pull it down to release it. My pick tool, pull it down, and then disconnect. And then we have two coolant lines to get to. We have one right here on the side. You can go ahead and release that one now. There's going to be a little bit of coolant that comes out of there. So again, I'm just using a pick to pull down the clip, just like so. And then we'll pull the hose off. Now we have a Torx on the bottom. That's going to free up the little clamp that holds that against our fan shroud. And then we can get to the upper hose after. So with that T25 out, that's going to free up our pump. And now we can maneuver it a little bit more to get this upper clip off and free up our pump the rest of the way. We have a couple things to free from our shroud, as well as some more Torx bolts here at the bottom. One of them being a coolant line that runs right up here. We're just going to try to pop the clip off of the fan shroud. You can open up the clip instead, but the clip kind of gets in the way if you leave it on the fan shroud. So I'm just using a flathead to pry it out. And there we go. And now that one is free. We have another one up top, which we'll do from up top. We also have this coolant line here. This one's just kind of clipped into the shroud itself. We can just pop it out by hand. That's going to free that baby up there. And then normally, if you were just doing the water pump, you can just do the two Torx here at the end to free up the shroud from the bottom of our radiator assembly. In our case, we're doing everything, so we're going to remove both of those Torx bolts out of our way. Looking at this now, the last bottom two Torx for the DCT cooler, if you have a DCT equipped car, probably not necessary to remove. The radiator is probably just going to come out of this housing, but it's still a good idea to pull it off, inspect it, and we are going to be replacing this for a future DIY. All right, with the bottom two T25s removed, again, no real need to undo the back ones for the DCT cooler, but it doesn't hurt to remove them and just clean up that cooler while you're at it. This hose here that we freed up from the fan shroud is going to be in our way because it clips into the radiator and it's going to block one of the tabs that go in and out. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect that now while I have you down here, and then we'll head back up top and remove a whole bunch more things. All right, up top we have quite a bit to remove, starting with our carbon fiber brace. To get that off, we're going to remove these two cowling pieces on either side. They have 3/4 turn 10mm nuts that stay with the cowl piece, and then an expanding rivet on the end. Our car is a little worse for wear. We've been taking this apart on and off many times, so our rivets are currently missing. But once you pop those out, you can unlock your 10mm nuts, just doing a counterclockwise 1/4 turn. Lift it up, pull it off, and set it to the side. We're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. That's going to expose the 13mm bolts on either side of our brace, so we'll zap those out and the ones up front. With that flapped over, we have one 10mm here for our expansion tank. Next, we're going to work on removing our intake. So to do that, we have a couple clamps here, and here we have the aftermarket Venturi intake, which is a really nice piece, and we have a DIY on how to install this. We also have a couple videos where we remove the factory air boxes as well, so if you want to see how that is done, Feel free to skim the YouTube channel to see those, but the same general idea applies. We're gonna undo the clamps here and here. We might be able to take this out as one piece, but I don't wanna mess with it too much. And we also have a sensor right here that can be undone now. There's just a little tab here that you push on the back side, and then you pull it back to release it. This one's a little bit tricky because there's not a lot of tab to grab onto. And we'll just tuck that baby out of our way. This soft line pops out of our intake tube here. Just using a flathead screwdriver to undo these clamps. And then we can pop this baby out of its rubber grommet over here. Slide that off and set it safely somewhere to the side. Also a great time to inspect your filters. We have a vacuum line here to free up on our pipe. Just pinch either side on the ribbed side of the clip to release. Pinch them together at the same time, not either side or either or, do them both evenly. Continuing on with removal so we can get our fan out, we have another clip up top here, just like we did on the bottom. I'm just using a flathead screwdriver to pry it out, and then we'll get the electrical connector and move on from there. So this one's already been out once or twice before, so it's not gonna fight us too much to get it out, but that is gonna give us a lot of room to work with. And another thing you can do while we're here is undo this line. For now, it's really not a problem. We're just gonna let it hang out, but we are gonna be separating this when we get the water pump out, as our new hose will be replacing this. So for now, we'll let that hang out there. On the passenger side, we have an electrical connector down below. We're gonna pop this harness off of the fan shaft first, like that. Then we'll reach in there and get the connector undone, just squeezing either end of it to release the tabs. This one's gonna be more by feel than anything you can see. Oh, there we go. Okay, we're just gonna tuck that connector to the side. Now we're gonna lift our fan shroud assembly. Because we've drained the system with coolant, I'm gonna pop this line off just to show you a better view of what we're working with. However, if you weren't doing the radiator, this isn't mandatory. But right here, now you can see this a bit more clear. This needs to come up out of this locking channel, and then it's gonna rotate towards the engine. So we're gonna lift, then we're just gonna pry. There we go. And now we should be able to drop the radiator down. I'm gonna leave it engaged on the top here, you'll see, and you'll notice this again when we reinstall it. It clips into the radiator right there. So we're gonna leave it on there for now, raise the car up, and then we'll drop the fan out the bottom. The fan shroud, unhinge it from our radiator, and just come down slowly, making sure we're not getting hung up on any of the hoses or the clips that we undid. And trying not to damage the fins on the radiator is another large thing, whether you're gonna be replacing it or not. Just assume that you're not. And now this baby's out. We're gonna set this to the side. We have our pig mat down here catching a little bit of drips coming from the radiator. But we're one step closer to both the radiator and the water pump, so let's set this to the side. All right, at this point, we have our fan assembly out of the way. We can continue on with either doing a radiator or a water pump. So for that, let's head back up top in the engine bay and go on from there. All right, continuing on with the radiator removal, we have to remove this upper radiator support. And so for that, we have a bunch of 13 mil bolts. Well, we have 4 of those, T30s and some T40s. So starting with the 13s up top, we have 2 on either side by the hood latches. 2 more on the passenger side. Then we're going to switch over to our T30 bit. We'll do the same thing on the passenger side. Down here at the front, we have a couple more T30s. We have 2 T40s in the middle. Moving on with our radiator removal, we're going to free up the hood latch wire or cable. And if you really want, you can pop up the hood latch from its home and just tuck this baby somewhere out back out of the way so that the line's not messing with us while we're working over here. Next, we have 2 T25s up top to remove. We have a couple more hoses still attached. We have the expansion tank hose right here. We can go ahead and undo this one. I have a new one of these, so we are going to replace this one. Just because these are kind of hard plastic and they get brittle with age. And these are an easy thing to break over time, especially if you're working in here and you accidentally bump it. So use a flathead to separate it from the tank. And honestly, at this point, if you're doing all this work, it's probably not a horrible idea to replace the expansion tank if it's the original one to the car. They tend to split here at the seams. And looking closely at this one, I'm noticing there's a little bit of coolant here, whether this is from up there or something starting here. So we might just throw one on at this point. We have one more T30 holding it in there, and then we can get it out of there. Next, we have our, if you will, lower radiator hose. That one sits behind this inlet pipe. Just gonna reach under here and pop up the clip. The fins on these radiators are incredibly delicate. I mean, this is brand new and there's already 1 or 2 that are a little marked up. So be super gentle as you drop it in. If you need a second set of hands to hold some things out of the way, not a bad idea. So I'm trying to keep this a bit separate from the whole sandwich situation here until it gets further down. And then we can feed it into the bottom of our radiator brackets. Then you can see on the bottom of the radiator bracket, there's a little overlap, and that's going to allow the radiator to tuck in on both sides. Both sides have that. All right, with that in, now we're going to get our top piece in and our 2 T25s to just secure everything from moving around. All right, we're going to feed this baby back in. This one kind of tucks in behind the AC condenser between the radiator brackets. So we're just going to tuck in the little corners. Tuck that baby down. T25 on either side. And then these T25s, you have to remember they are just going into plastic. So there's no need to gorilla them in. Once they snug up, you're good to go. Now we have the radiator back in, we can get the electric cooling fan back in. So we're gonna go from underneath. So we'll raise the vehicle up and then slowly slide that baby back up. Well, after taking a quick coolant bath and moving some lines out of the way, we're gonna feed our cooling fan in. Just remember this tab, you want it at the 90-degree position. We'll call it the service position so that it can go back up. And if possible, the goal here is to get it past the top of our radiator sandwich and get these little tabs to hook in at the very top of our assembly. Right now, I'm just assuming that we're in. I've pushed the fan shroud assembly up and into our bottom of our radiator support sandwich here. We're gonna hop back up top, make sure that the 2 tabs are engaged on the top, and then we can come back down here, get some T25s in. We're gonna be doing a lot of up and down. So for now, let's go back up top and make sure that everything's in the right place. Okay, back up top, we have these 2 tabs lined up, but we still have that little 90-degree flap that needs to be flattened back out. So let's go ahead and do that now. So now we're gonna open up our tab, lift it up until it pops in. There we go, beautiful. With that one in, we just wanna make sure that these are still in there. And then we'll go underneath, but from here I can see that the bottom of the shroud is still within the brackets. And then of course, while you're doing this, you know, if you want to throw your radiator hose back on, no reason not to, you're more than welcome to. There we go, beautiful. For those of you playing along at home with us, you'll notice that my DCT cooler is back in. There was no need to take that out, so hopefully you've been watching through before starting at home. And on the plus side, I snapped some T25s, which were seized in plastic, believe it or not. And I had to replace radiator brackets, but that's neither here nor there. We have two T25s that do need to go back in at the bottom of our radiator sandwich, one on either corner. That's going to help hold our fan shroud assembly to our radiator sandwich, as we're calling it today. Now, while we're down here, we can also work over this cooling hose. This was one of the hoses that was in our way, and that one goes into our radiator right over there. With that baby in, we can just guide it along the rest of the fan shroud housing. Just kind of clips into place. Pretty straightforward. You can't mess it up. All right, that one's nice and tucked in. Next, we're gonna head back up top. We can hook up the other two coolant hoses and then go from there. All right, back up top, we're gonna hook up the technically lower radiator hose. That one goes from the radiator to the thermostat. I did end up getting a new one. The replacement is pretty straightforward. So we're gonna pop that baby in. It's pretty much already self-feeding itself in. Get this baby plugged in. There we go. Then we'll get the electrical connector over. Get this baby lined up. This one's gonna be a little bit down there, but you'll be able to feel once it clips in all the way. Just trying to guide it right now. All right. So I have it all lined up, and I'm just gonna push down with this flathead. And we just have little plastic rivets here that clip into the housing. We have one more here on the side. Beautiful. With that buttoned up, there's really no right or wrong way on how you continue buttoning up the ancillaries. For us, we're gonna head underneath and just get the rest of the fan shrouding, if you will, in place. Then we'll get our auxiliary water pump in. We're just gonna button up everything at the bottom, so we have to stop crawling, getting underneath there, and then we'll come up here and button everything up for the end. All right, next on our laundry list is gonna be to reinstall our auxiliary pump. It only goes in one way. There's the opening for the T25, which is gonna go up against our fan shroud assembly. We have our coolant line off to the side, which lives right here. This is the one that bathed me earlier, and I'm not gonna let it do it again. And we have our top line. So the way I'm gonna work with this is get the top line in first, then we can do the side, and then we'll key it into the shroud. That is clipped in. So if you want to take a quick peek, this is what we got so far. I just reached up and clipped in the top of our water pump to the cooling line. Now we can do the side one, which again, this is the one that's bathed me too many times. I don't know how there is still coolant in this system, but somehow there is. Line that baby up. Okay. So now that one is clipped in. We take a quick peek. And now with that, we can key the pump into the shroud. So make sure it pushes in and locks in. You should be not able to pull it away from the shroud, and that's how you know you're locked into place. One T25. Beautiful. With that in the place, in the way, whatever you want to call it. Don't forget your electrical connector. Bam, baby. Now we're going to install the bottom half of our fan shrouding. That's two more T25s, if you remember. Soft rubbery end goes towards our auxiliary pump. This only goes on one way. Then this keys into the bottom of the shroud, and it stays in place nicely. And now we can get our two T25s and lock it down. Now we're going to swing over our CSF oil cooler. We do have a DIY if you want to upgrade yours as well, which we highly recommend. This is a nice piece, and it is a super, well, I want to say super simple, but it is a very simple DIY relative to some of the other stuff we have done on this M4, which almost just requires a lot of patience. A lot of stuff has to come undone. before you can get to what you're working on. The torque spec on these 13s isn't that big. It's only 23 Newton meters. We're just gonna snug these down with the electric ratchet. Perfect. Once the bushings start to show a little bit of squeeze, like my spinal discs, you're good. Beautiful. All right, next on our laundry list of things to do is going to be to install our stiffening plate. Once we have the stiffening plate back in, then we'll do the oil cooler guard, and that should pretty much button us up down here and we can go back up top. All right, we have our new 16 millimeter bolts. We're gonna get these started by hand, at least one or two to hold up the skid plate. Then we'll snug them up a little bit with the electric ratchet. And then, take a shot every time I say, and then we will torque them down properly. Again, these are torque to yield bolts, which is why you need to replace them every time, unfortunately. But that's the name of the game when you're in the European sector. These all get torqued down to 56 Newton meters plus an additional 90 degrees or an additional quarter turn, whichever you'd like to call it. And we're going to use the large 1/2-inch ratchet to do the additional 90 degrees. You can mark these with a paint pen and then watch until you do the quarter turn. But if you've done these once or twice, then you get a pretty good feel for what your quarter turn is. Now we can get our oil cooler guard in place. Again, we have the fall line unit in our car. We do have a DIY on how to install that one as well. Pretty straightforward job, and it offers a lot more protection than the stock plastic one. So we're gonna bring that baby over. Again, hardware's a little bit different, but same idea if you had the stock one. So first step, we're gonna tuck the front of it underneath our bumper cover. All right, doing our best to keep everything lined up. I'm gonna get one of our, in your case, if you're running the factory stuff, one of your 8mm bolts in. For us, we are using the hardware equipped with the fall line kit, which requires a 3mm hex. So we're just gonna get one of those started. All right, I'm just gonna hand feed in the 13s. Again, just doing this still, so that everything is nice and lined up. All right, with everything lined up, I'm gonna snug up my 3mm hex hardware. In your case, your 8mm, then we'll do the 13s and move on from there. The only other thing I would suggest that you take care of while you're under here now, or at least on the side of the car, is your fender liners and your bottom splash shields. Now I know if you've been watching the build or the DIYs, I keep saying we have new ones, and I finally do really have new ones for the car, all of which are available on fcpo.com. But we're gonna leave these off. We still have a few more things to fix on our build side of things. But again, a couple of 8mm bolts, throw these babies in. We already have the auxiliary coolers buttoned up. So if you haven't done so already, feel free to throw those on. Wheels, 140 Newton meters on the lug bolts. For us, we're gonna assume that's all been done, and we're gonna move back up top to button up the top, and then be one step closer to filling the system back up with coolant. Right, so basically what I was trying to say is I like to use a little bit of dielectric grease, especially when installing new components, new O-rings. If you're not gonna be putting coolant on it, coolant works fine. There is a lubricant aspect to it, but I find that the dielectric is a little bit easier to work with. It does a little bit of a better job, and as long as you handle it carefully, you're not gonna contaminate your cooling system with it. So we went ahead and threw in a new tank behind the scenes on the build series. Obviously all the hoses are new, the radiator's new, everything's new, so there's nothing that's already pre-lubed, if you will. So once I remember how this goes, then we'll put it on. All right, we're gonna pop in the one end on the radiator first. This is a new expansion tank line. BMW updated the design a bit by adding this rubber bushing here, or this rubber buffer, to the outside so it doesn't rub up against the cooling hose or the radiator hose. Beautiful. With that, we can get our hood release latches situated. I had just swung it over to the cowl, but now it's back. We're gonna tuck it back under like so. Feed this baby where it's gonna be living. Remember, this coolant line will go up over here. I just tucked it up out of our way earlier, so don't worry about that one just yet. We'll try to keep these latches lined up. Well, let's get our top cowl piece back in. So as you bring this over, there's two tabs here, or two little plastic bushings that go into the two rubber bushings on the end brackets of the radiator. Just make sure those key in. You can pop these out if it's giving you a hard time and then put them in after the fact. But I'm gonna do my best to just line them up now. Get those babies in there. All right. Now, because we also have an upgraded CSF front heat exchanger, it's gonna be pushing everything a little bit offset for us, if you will. That's something we did during the build side of things. So I'm gonna just line this up as best as I can, get some hardware started, and then we'll get everything snugged up. All right, now we're gonna snug these 13s down just using the electric ratchet. The majority of the hardware here is about 11 Newton meters, 8 to 11, so really not that much. We're just gonna make them hand tight with the electric ratchet and call it good. We're gonna switch over to T30s. Get the ones that go into our headlights started first. Couple more T30s. All right, now we're gonna switch over to our T40 for the final two in the middle. Now that we have this buttoned up, our hood latches are good to go. We're gonna grab our intake. Again, we have an Venturi system in place, but the factory intake, same general idea. We'll get that baby over here, get that snugged in, and then go from there. Continuing on, we're gonna feed in our Venturi inlet pipe. We're gonna get this baby hooked up first. We're gonna leave it loose for now. This coolant hose can come over. We can clip that baby in, no problem. And this is going to give us play, so we're not going to do that clamp just yet to get in the filter cone. Get this baby over here. Get that fed in. Oh yeah. Get this lined up. It's important to note when tightening down these carbon pieces, you don't want to crank on them like you would on the regular plastic OE stuff. You can crack the carbon and then you're going to be upset. You're going to be in a world of hurt. So you're going to have to buy a new kit. Flathead screwdriver. I'm just going to snug down these clamps. Okay, hose is back in place. Clip that alligator clip that we ended earlier to give us some slack in this line. All we have, well, we have a couple things left, but next on our list is going to be the carbon brace. So let's bring that baby over and snug it into place. Carbon brace is going in. So BMW recommends you replace the 13 mil bolts on this brace every time you take it apart. This time I'm actually going to put some fresh hardware in. They are not torque to yield bolts, but it is a recommendation per BMW. The shorter ones go in the front. Don't forget, the rest are all the same length. .23 Newton meters. Don't forget to get your 10 mil bolts back in to hold the expansion tank in place. All right, so we're gonna feed our cowl in. These ends clip into the center of the windshield cowl. Pretty simple, just like that. Tuck this baby under the weather stripping. Get that in place. Then we have 3 10 mil quarter turn plastic nuts. We're going to turn them clockwise to lock them in. Then you would put an expanding rivet back in here. I'm going to do the same thing on the passenger side. Same thing, one more expanding rivet. And now we can throw in our beauty cover once more. So for those of you that have been following the channel a bit, you'll notice that we've used this U-View vacuum fill tool quite a bit. I have about 4 gallons of coolant here. This is 2 gallons of distilled water and 2 gallons of Xerex. We're going to use our vacuum fill tool to pull vacuum in both the low temp and high temp circuits. And we're going to try to get that to about 25 on our gauge. Once it hits 25, we're going to let it sit for a minute or two. and that's going to ensure that there's no leaks in the system. Now, there's obviously always a chance. We changed a lot of things on this car, and one or two things behind the scenes, if you will, on the build series side of things over on the FCPO media channel. So a chance for a leak is pretty great. We're going to hook up our air line, pull vacuum, and then go from there. Keep the valve closed, and then I like to use a little towel around the nozzle or the neck of the vacuum fill tool. If there's any coolant left behind, it vaporizes on its way out and covers everything. So we like to keep that from becoming a mess. Just going to be super gentle with how I'm running my coolant line over, or my air line. I don't want to scuff up the wrap. Okay, that's okay there. All right. When using this tool, it's totally normal to see your coolant lines collapse. That's exactly what you want. We're going to let that sit for a minute or two, and then we'll pick it back up with filling the system up. So the most important bit when using this tool is keeping the end of your line fully submerged in coolant. If at any moment you raise it up and it pulls in air, it defeats the entire purpose. You're going to have to drain the cooling system again and redo your steps. So keep that all the way in. If you have to tape it down, tape it down. If you need a second set of hands to hold it in there, do that. Anything you can to avoid getting air back in the system. I'm going to hold that right at the bottom of the bucket, and then we're going to open up our valve and just let her do its thing. You can just see the coolant level start to drop, and eventually it's just going to get to a point where it's not going to pull in any more coolant. We'll close the valve, move on over to the low temp circuit expansion tank, and do the exact same thing again. I'm going to pull this a bit closer. One thing to note with this tool, it's going to get it pretty close to the fill line. In our case right now, we are just over the fill line. There's a yellow step inside of the tank on both of them that show where you're at the max. If you're over that and you can't see it anymore, you're too full. If you're under it and the yellow is exposed, then you still need to top it off. The reality is we're going to run the car, we're going to get it hot, let it cool down, and then check the coolant level again. And then we'll make our adjustment as needed. If we need to pull a little bit out, we will. If we need to add a little bit, we will. So for now, we're going to leave it. Do the same thing on this other auxiliary. While this fills up, my good people, that is going to conclude this DIY for today. Overall, a pretty involved job on the S55, and like any other thing you do to this car, you got to take off a lot of the components up top to free up some room and underneath the vehicle. Again, I can't stress enough how much easier this whole job is by removing the stiffening plate underneath. While it's just about an inch of clearance that you gain, it makes your life a lot easier to get that fan shroud in and out. Again, you can do half of this work if you're not doing the radiator, but overall, this is hopefully going to cover everything you need to know on how to overhaul your main cooling system on your S55. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, or any tips or tricks that you want to add, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. And if you want to learn a little bit more about this car and why it looks the way it does and why we may be giving it away later on, be sure to subscribe over on the FCPO Media YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. Catch you on the next one.